Welcome to Sold with Webinars, a podcast that aims to uncover how the most successful experts, coaches, consultants, and e-course professionals sell their products and services with just one sales presentation or webinar. A simple sales webinar can transform the business and life of a solopreneur. And this podcast will show you how other experts just like you are generating 6 and 7 figures per year online with their webinars. So let's get started. Hey, it's Joel here, and welcome to another episode of Sold with Webinars. Today, our special guest is somebody who has been in the coaching and training space for, I'd say about 8 years now after she had been transitioning out of real estate investing. And so I invited Susan Lassiter-Lyons to join us on the podcast today because she had been trying all sorts of different types of webinars for a long time. And she had a unique experience with a light bulb moment that allowed her to drastically improve her webinar conversions by more than 55%. So Susan is somebody who now trains other people in alternative forms of investing. And so check out this episode and understand what she was doing differently with her webinars and what that light bulb moment was, so you can apply it to your webinars and drastically improve the rate of conversion for your programs. Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joel. So good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. Why don't you do our audience a quick favor? Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're living right now. You're in a beautiful office space. I'm very jealous. But tell us a little bit about your background, the space that you're in, and we'll start there.
Sure. So I'm Susan Lassiter-Lyons. I run a company called the Investor Insights, and we focus on training and coaching programs for alternative investors. And so that can be, investing in crowdfunding, investing in real estate, investing in private lending, peer-to-peer lending, pot stocks, Bitcoin, all that kind of sexy new stuff that's coming down the pike now. My background is I started investing in the stock market and some stock options way back in 1990. I had a particularly profitable trade. I bought call options on Unilever stock when they did a 4-for-1 stock split and ended up making $1 bazillion. And then the tax bill came. I was like, okay, so now I need to figure out a way to keep more of this income. And so that's kind of what sent me in the direction of real estate investing. And I started doing that in 1994. I was investing in real estate on the side. I started a mortgage company to specifically focus on providing financing solutions just for real estate investors here in Denver, Colorado, where I'm based. And ran that for about 8 years. We put together a private equity mortgage fund to become what's known as a hard money lender in our market, meaning I was making very short-term, high interest rate, high fee construction loans to fix and flippers. And then 2008 happened, and everything kind of came crashing down, and I was subject to a lot of the downturn in not only the real estate market, but in the financial markets. So I ended up in 2008, the end of 2008, closing my mortgage company and shutting down my private equity fund and wondering, what the hell am I going to do now? I went to Mexico to lay on the beach and think about, what my life, what the next iteration of it was going to be. I cried a lot. I drank a lot of margaritas. And so, what kind of came to me through my big swollen eyes and my, margarita drunkenness was, hey, you've been doing this for these real estate investors all this time, providing the financing. Why don't you start teaching them how to do this for themselves and cut out the middlemen like me? So in January 2009, I started a training coaching company called the Investor Insights to bring that training and coaching, to teach real estate investors how to find great deals, how to fund those deals, how to raise capital directly from individual investors and put it to work in their own businesses. And, that's kind of morphed over the years as thanks to the Jobs Act, a lot of the restrictions on non-accredited investors, meaning just the little guys like us, we can now invest in really cool things like private placements and, crowdfunding and that kind of thing. And so I'm kind of retiring a lot of my old real estate investing training and moving more in the direction of teaching, some of the newer, sexier stuff. And I, recently moved into this new office here in downtown Denver. And Joel, I was telling Joel, like right before we went live, I was, where I'm situated. So if you can imagine, I'm on the 16th floor of a high rise. This is top level, a penthouse, I guess you might say. And I'm west facing. And so I get to see the whole front range of the Rocky Mountains. If I look right out here for these football fans, I'm looking right at Mile High Stadium where my Denver Broncos are going to be playing in a few short weeks. And if I look a little farther right, I get to see the Pepsi Center for the basketball fans. And so just loving it. And here we are.
So real estate investor turned educator / course creator, or however
Mexico
you want to.
Crybaby?
In Mexico crybaby, exactly. Quite the transition, quite the shift.
Yeah.
And so you're teaching people all about these very unique ways to invest. So not just real estate investing, you said Bitcoin, pot stock. I love how you called it pot stock. I've never heard that before. So
pot stock.
Pot
and
stock.
I have a whole portfolio of pot stocks that I call my potfolio.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're listening right now and you don't know what we mean by pot stock, we mean like cannabis investing and whatnot. So that's
investing
awesome.
in legal, medical, and recreational marijuana. And being in Colorado, it's all legal here, folks. So it's all good.
Cool. So let's talk about webinars. Strangely enough, we're on this podcast talking about webinars, right? Tell us about how you discovered webinars when you started doing this business in 2009. When did you start experimenting with webinars?
Pretty early on, right? I found out about webinars in 2009, and the only technology back then was GoToWebinar, which is still around, and I still have my old account.
You're lucky because it's extremely expensive now.
I know. I couldn't believe it. It's like, the poor people that are coming later, having to pay. Well, anyway, it's a whole other story. But yeah, so I discovered it luckily pretty early on. And I can still totally remember the very first webinar that I did. It was for my very first program that I put together. It was a $97 course. It was called Portfolio Loan Blueprint, which just basically taught real estate investors how to go to the smaller local community banks and credit unions and still get really great loans that they couldn't get from a Wells Fargo or a Chase or something like that. And so I did a webinar for that. I had no idea what I was doing. My biggest fear was that nobody was going to show up. And I wasn't exactly sure how the GoToWebinar control panel worked. I thought, the attendees would be able to see how many people were on, and I was going to be so embarrassed if one person showed up and they saw that they were the only person on, they'd immediately hang up and think I was a loser. So I made all my friends and family log on to the webinar. I'm like, you guys just log on for 5 minutes, right? And if nobody comes, then I'll just end it. But if somebody comes, then you can leave. And they're like, oh, all right. So they all logged on. And then by some miracle, I ended up getting 7 people on my webinar that weren't my friends and family. And I was just like, holy, 7 people. 7 people, And I think I made 3 sales. So I made almost $300. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing since sliced bread.
Game changer.
Yeah, it's a total game changer. So that was the very first one and kind of the early discovery process of that.
Great. So started out with webinars right out the gate, doing live webinars with GoToWebinar. As your training business started to grow, you were testing out other things like email marketing and video sales letters, long form sales letters, right? Let's take us through the evolution of your online business.
Yeah. So, oh boy, list building. So, we're doing webinars, right? People have to register for our webinars. So that's a form of list building as well, right? So let's make no mistake about that. And I think that webinars has always been, one of the top 2 ways that I can generate revenue in my business. That and email marketing. Email marketing has been very powerful to me, but in a very specific way. It's mainly for me about the broadcast offers as opposed to, kind of what some people call the prospect follow-up sequence or like the engagement sequence.
Mm-hmm.
So, I realized pretty early on that I needed more than one like funnel, right, for each product. And so I'm a tester anyway, and I like to try new stuff. So I have, for each of my products, historically, I've done a webinar funnel where I, market directly to the webinar registration page and then hold a live webinar. And I've marketed directly to an opt-in page where people opt in and then it goes to a video sales letter or a long form sales letter. And if they don't purchase right away on, the VSL side or the long form sales letter side, then I crafted an email follow-up campaign to those prospects to try to get them to buy. If I take that prospect follow-up sequence and stack it up against, right, a webinar funnel, my webinar funnel outperforms that prospect follow-up sequence now by a factor of about 4 to 1.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that it has such a dramatic change?
It's huge. It's huge, first of all. I think it has, there are a couple of reasons for it. Number one, I think it has to do with the event, right? The kind of the buzz around event marketing. And webinar is very much an event and people really like that, right? So it's like, ooh, it has a higher perceived value than just like a training video or an email course or something like that we see. So I think that's first and foremost why. The second reason why I think is because people get to know you, right? They get to see your face and they get to hear your voice and they get to hear your personality and your authenticity come through. And, I've been very lucky and I have a little bit of a background in, it sounds really pretentious to say I have a background in theater because it's not that. I'm talking about like, plays and musicals when I was in high school and stuff and singing in choir and being in show choir, which was the 80s version of Glee, which was not nearly as cool. And so, I have a little bit of that performer in me already.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had people comment on my voice before, that I have a voice for radio, usually is what they say. I usually will add that I also have a face for radio. But I think that it's the combination of, event marketing. It's a live event. It's a higher perceived value. And people really get to have the opportunity to actually see you, hear you, and see for themselves like what you're all about. And I think that that's huge. That's something that we're never going to be able to replicate in email. I'm a pretty good writer and I can, make my point in writing and I can let my personality shine through in those emails. But, it just takes it to a whole other level when they can see you and hear you.
I agree with you 100%. I think there's another important aspect that explains why webinars do so well versus other forms of conversion techniques, and that's the comprehensive ability to learn via video or slides or audio versus reading only, or maybe it's a video sales letter. But like with webinars where you teach a little bit and you inspire them and you give them hope, it's like the ultimate form of content marketing. It's delivering value while also giving the offer, and you do it all within a condensed, a shortened period of time. And sometimes it's really difficult to educate via email. Now, obviously you can, there are people who can do it very, very well, but that's just my opinion on why webinars work so well.
Agree. Yeah, absolutely.
So let's fast forward a little bit now. So you've been doing webinars for quite a few years, having some success with them. When you invested into the Webinar Accelerator, what was going on? What made you take that leap? Were there any problems going on with your existing webinars? Explain why, because you were selling, you were making money with webinars. So what was the reasoning?
I'm always looking for a way to optimize my conversion, always. And I've really run the gamut with, webinar training. And, basically up until very recently, my flagship program it's called Getting the Money, and it teaches real estate investors how to raise capital. And it's an inexpensive program, right? It was only selling for $497. I was getting like unsolicited testimonials from students, saying, oh my God, this is the best thing since sliced bread. I just raised $300,000. I just raised $500,000. I just raised $1 million. Thank you so much. You've changed my life. You've changed my business. And I knew that it worked because I personally had used that strategy to raise about $30 million for my own real estate investing business and mortgage firm. And I was just stunned that when I would do a webinar, even with those kinds of results, with at that low of a price point, that the highest sales conversion I ever saw on a webinar was about 11%. And I just thought, I hear all these stories of these people that are crushing it with these offers that are higher, price than mine, between like $1,000 and $2,000, that didn't get nearly the results that my program did. And, they're like doing 20-25% conversion. And I thought, there's a disconnect there. And I just could never figure out what it was. So I tried myself to optimize it. And then I actually hired some guys who build themselves as, we'll build your webinar for you. And it's, we're so fantastic and it's going to crush. And I literally paid them $25,000 to do my webinar. And I had gotten my webinar up to, its highest performing at 11% conversion. The first time I ran their version of the webinar, it crushed at about 5.5%. So I was like, okay, good lesson. And the lesson for me was that nobody knows my business or my offer better than I do. So don't outsource that. And I've just been trying to incrementally improve it anytime I can get an idea or, a different program. There was just something that was missing, and I could never figure out what the heck it was. So when your program came along, the Webinar Accelerator, honestly, I just wanted that software. I was like, just give me SlideSell. That's all I want. I think I even wrote into your support desk, was like, how can I just get this? And they're like, sorry, you got to go through the program too and the training. And I was like, one of those people. And this is probably a good lesson, right, for the veterans that are listening. I was one of those people that thought, oh, look, I've been doing this long enough. I know how to do this. I just need that software because the software is going to have the thing that I'm missing. I don't need to go through that training because, blah, 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 he can't tell me anything. Big mistake. Huge mistake, folks. Okay. I came across so many great nuggets going through your training and, hearing your program through Webinar Accelerator that, I was able to make just a few simple tweaks, not even really using the SlideSell software, just to my existing webinars and, get incremental pickups in conversion.
So what were the tweaks?
So first of all, and I made note of them when you were talking because I didn't want to forget them. Mm-hmm. My first mistake, and I had kind of heard this before, but you really drove it home. I gave way too much content. Just way too much content. I overtaught.
Curse of the expert.
Right? Total curse of the expert. And I had a coach one time years ago, when I was kind of talking to her about these problems. And she's like, your number one problem is that you have a smart problem. And I'm like, what does that mean? And she's like, you're too damn smart, right? For your own good. She's like, you're up here, right? With your experience and your level of knowledge, and your students, right, are down here. She's like, you're not doing anything at all to close this gap. She's like, you need to be down here where they are, yep, right, when you're teaching them. And so when I'm talking about all this stuff that's completely over their head, all that it's telling them is, oh, well, this sounds great, but I'm not ready for it yet. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that was by far and away the biggest error that I made. I went through my webinar and just kind of indiscriminately chopped out half the content and got my first pickup in conversion. And I was like, oh my God. And for me, I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, my people they're going to complain because, this is now just about the offer with just a little bit of training and, they're used to more training. And it was like, people loved it. People were like, oh my God, this is the best webinar you've ever done. And I was like, seriously? I just cut out more than half of the content. This is the best webinar now. Mm-hmm. So that was what really told me that was a huge problem. So first thing, experts out there, we need to close that gap, right? And present the stuff on the level of the student, meet them where they are instead of meeting them up here where we want to take them.
Yep.
That was lesson number one.
A confused mind doesn't buy. And when you speak to them at that top level, they're confused, they're overwhelmed, and 100%.
Yes, all of the above. All of the above.
Yep.
And it impacts sales. So that was the first one. The second one was, I would call it, and I'm sure you have a specific name for it, but for me, it was not enough emotion, right? So I tend to be very analytical, right? I'm an investor. I just want the numbers and I just want the facts. But there's a whole other world of people out there. And honestly, if I'm being honest, me too, who buys on emotion, right? So we buy on emotion, and I think we support it with fact.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when we make that buying decision, I really believe that buying decision is made from our emotional side. And then I think that kind of our analytical side is the one that tries to justify that buying decision or not justify that buying decision, right? Our head can definitely override our heart or support it depending on what it is. So I really tried to bring in more of my story, which in the past, I always thought that was just going to bore people. And when I talk about story more specifically, and kind of what you talk about is, like the hero's journey, like, where did I start? Where did I get to? What did I learn along the way? What setbacks did I have along the way? And really talk about like that, hey, this was my whole journey to figure out this solution. And here's where I am now as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
And people want to hear that. They want to be able to identify with you and they want to be able to relate to you. Like for example, after the crash, I was kind of living on my gas card, literally, because I didn't have any extra cash at all. Somebody maybe out there can be like, oh my God, I can relate to that, right? Because I lost a lot in the crash. And, boy, I wish I would have had a gas card, at Texaco with an ATM, I could take out cash too, so just kind of incorporating more of my story, but in a specific way so that they could actually see my journey
Mm-hmm.
and, see that I just didn't pop on the scene as this, rich expert, but instead it's been a process that's taken me years, which just makes what I'm teaching them all the more valuable. So that was number 2. And then future pacing was like kind of the third layer that I added to it. And when I started talking about, imagine what your life will be when you can achieve this, or imagine, how your friends will perceive you. When you have a make money offer, it's got to be aspirational marketing, right?
Yep.
Because they don't want to make money just to have money. I mean, who wants to make money just to have money? You want to make money because you want status.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make money because you want your friends and your family to perceive you differently. You want to kind of be the big guy, right? You want to go to Thanksgiving dinner and have people look at you with respect as opposed to rolling their eyes and just wondering, what harebrained scheme you're up to now, right? So
I love telling the hero's journey as it relates to future pacing, right? So whenever I'm writing scripts for clients or whatever, and it's a make money online or make money opportunity, business opportunity, a lot of times we'll tell the story through the eyes of their hero's journey. It's like, oh, well, I wanted to do this because I wanted my family to, I was tired of my family looking down on me. I was tired of my friends looking down on me. So it's rather than saying like, so here's a tidbit for you, rather than saying like, imagine what it would look like for you. It's like, well, you can do that in another way too. So you can kind of compound it. It's like, oh, because they're always going to picture you as the expert and they're always going to picture you as who they want to be. And so if you show them this is who I wanted to be, they're like, oh, I want that too, right? So
yeah,
anyway.
Exactly. Thank you for doing that. I just made a note. I hope you guys are taking notes. This is
So what was the transformation with your old webinars and then when you started to implement these things? Like, can you share some numbers? What were some of the boosts that you saw?
Yeah. So actually, I track all this stuff. And I think I shared with you the most recent one that I did.
Mm-hmm.
So it's for a program that I have. It's called Master Lease Option Method. It basically teaches people how to acquire apartment buildings and other cash flow commercial real estate by becoming the master tenant as opposed to buying it.
Mm-hmm.
And they can make income on someone else's asset, basically. And so before, I don't have my numbers pulled up, but I know there was I think it was about a 55% increase in sales conversion, just adding this stuff in. This was and the 55% was just on the most recent iteration of that webinar that I had before I came across your stuff, right? That's not including all of, the other webinar iterations that it took to get me there. But this one definitely had the most impact. And I saw about a 55% increase in sales on that. I'll tell you another mistake that I made historically, and somebody gave me this advice, and I wish I could remember who it was so I could go back and punch them right in the face. about, and this was one of the questions that I had for you in the Facebook page, because you talk about earnings per registrant as opposed to earnings per attendee.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, that's interesting. Like, how can you do earnings per registrant? You're like, because it, gives you a full picture of the whole webinar funnel. Well, back in the day, somebody who I paid attention to with webinars told me, don't ever do replays, because then you'll train your people that they don't have to attend live. They can just come to the replay.
I know who you're talking about. I'm not gonna list them, but yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Honestly, don't remember who it was, but if you know, maybe you can punch him in the face for me. And tell him it's from me. And so I was like, at first I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that because I really want to increase attendance. But then it's like, when now I like really build out like a whole replay sequence like you talk about, and I can earn more sales on the replay as opposed to, just having it end on the webinar and then getting a bunch of hate mail from my people saying, hello, some of us have a life, we can't come to wherever you say to be on Wednesday night at 7 p.m.,
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay. So that makes a lot of sense too, right?
Yep. It depends on the big picture marketing scheme. So I just finished up an interview with one of my clients, Jason Wardrop. So he'll be on the episode before yours. So when this gets released, go back and check out what we talked about in his, because it's very much relating to what you're talking about here.
Cool.
So I always tell my clients that it depends on what your marketing intent is. So 99.9% of the clients that I work with and that come through my program, it's all from cold traffic, webinars from cold traffic. You can use webinars for anything. So if you're doing a lot of warm market webinars and you're doing like weekly live webinars to the same list every time, I would still never really encourage getting rid of the replay sequence. I wouldn't ever encourage getting rid of the replay sequence, but it all depends on like really your cold market strategy. So if you are marketing cold traffic to your webinar, you don't want to say, oh, sorry, you can't get access to the replay. It's like, why? It's the first time they met you. Like, why are you ticking them off? Like, that's just not.
It's like my support people were like, really? Like, you have so many more people that want to see this thing. And I'm like, no, they can't. It's like, how mean is that? In hindsight, I know I pissed off so many people. So no, I'm glad you qualified that with, you're not going to recommend taking off the replay sequence, because I can respect people, that have different intentions and, different goals for their webinars, but dude, trust me on this one. I've tried it both ways. And I'm actually looking at my other screen right now. I'm going to just pull up the data from that last webinar, because I do want to give accurate numbers. I don't want to be one of those people that's like, oh, it's about 55%. Well, whatever. So I'll put my glasses on for this. Let me get it up here. Because it was dramatic. I was just like, you got to be kidding me. All right. So, and that's something else too. I know that in your program, you give us the spreadsheet, right, to track all of our webinars. That's so important. For people that aren't tracking their webinars right now and tracking the performance of each one, so that you can measure that incremental increase or decrease, kind of take some notes as to like what went well and what didn't go well, you're really missing out, because that just gives you the opportunity to keep incrementally making it better and better. All right. So I'll just kind of break it down here. The attendance rate was lower. So the attendance rate on the first one that I had done, or not the first one, but one that I just had, like the last time I had this was June of 2016. And the most recent one I did was July of 2017. So about a year apart.
Yep.
The attendance rate on the old one was 34.6. The attendance rate on this one went down a little bit to 24.3. The total sales percentage increased by, it's actually 56%. So I was a little bit low. And I went back and like calculated my old like earnings per registrant on the old webinar, just so that I could make sure I was doing apples to apples, right? And so the old EPR was $8.05 and the new EPR, $13.44.
Boom.
Thank you. Yeah. And, I was also asking you kind of about your percentages, right? Because you gave us that really great grid of like, if your offer is between this amount and this amount, you can expect like, a 4% sell through. If your offer is between this and this, maybe a 3%, 2%, 1%. And, I was like, okay. So I tested that and I ran that number. And actually, across this webinar funnel at this offer price, which was, because I did a package deal. It was just under $300. It came in at 4.5%. So it was dead on with what you are saying. So I'm like,
nice.
Joel's my guy.
Well, the next thing we got to work on for you, Susan, is raising your price. So I don't know if you...
Yes. I hear that one loud and clear. So with the new stuff that's coming out with the alternative investing, that's all going to be higher price stuff because, it's a heck of a lot sexier. And there's a lot more to it. And honestly, if I'm going to go through the same effort and provide the same level of like support and training, why not make it a $1,000 offer as opposed to, like a $200 or $300 offer? Because honestly, I'm basically giving $1,000 experience for a $300 price tag. And I think now's the time to make sure that price tag matches that experience.
100%.
Yeah.
More often than not, it's a confidence issue. Not saying that you're not confident, but like if you haven't ever sold a $1,000 offer, I've dealt with it tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of times. I had one of my clients, Adam Winnig, took him from $97 to $8,000. Right? It was the difference between, so you want to talk about I love Adam, so he wouldn't mind me sharing that. We've talked about that before publicly, but yeah, we went from $97 to like, we didn't immediately jump to 8,000, but it was just like incrementally, it was a business opportunity. So it was showing people how to make money. And like, dude, like you cannot come on as a client if you're at $97. Like, it's just not even going to make any sense. And so I think we initially started out at like 2,000. And then we went to 3, then we went to 5, and then we went to 8. And it was just night and day. Like the first month that we launched his webinar, he did like 120 grand. It was something stupid. So
yeah, totally. And I should tell you this too. And this is, I know it's bonus content that you have in Webinar Accelerator. The whole webinar to like a strategy session as opposed to a sale, because with my coaching, right, I never try to sell like the higher price coaching on webinars, because I've found that, once we get over, maybe $2,000-$3,000, then it really needs to be moved to, the phone. And so the coaching package that I was selling was $7,000 on the real estate investing side. And we ran a really great webinar, almost exactly how you sequence it in your bonus training, that led to a strategy session. And we were able to, enjoy paydays like that. I don't get a payday like that on my $97 or $197 programs, but certainly on that bigger ticket stuff, for sure, it works.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Your results have been amazing. I appreciate you sharing your story. Hopefully it gives our audience some hope that they can do the same. You shared a lot of great techniques for how you increased your conversion rates, which are very similar to what most people who are struggling, and then their transformation, the whole 9 yards. So to recap, you went from real estate investor to the market crash to Mexico crybaby to pot stock, and teaching other people how to invest in alternative forms of investing or even their own real estate. And so just to recap, how many products do you have right now?
I just retired like 5 of my old real estate products. So currently I have 3 front-end programs. One of them is the flagship How to Raise Capital. The other is the Master Lease program I talked about. And the one that I'm just getting ready to launch with webinar, by the way, is called Canavestor Lab. Teach people how to take advantage of the opportunity in cannabis.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Susan, thank you so much for sharing your story. I've very much enjoyed listening to your story and your transformation. And where can people connect with you if they so choose?
Sure. Yeah. Head over to the website. It's theinvestorinsights.com. And that's our main site. You can learn, we've got a really great blog there about alternative investing, and share some information about our products as well. And even give you the opportunity to sign up for a webinar. So there you go.
Theinvestorinsights.com. Awesome.
Yeah.
right? So the Investor Insights, perfect. All right. So
Yeah,
head over to the investor websites. Yeah, go ahead.
Joel, thank you. Right. So I'm very honored that you reached out and invited me to be a guest here. Webinars have made a huge difference in my life, but using the training from the Webinar Accelerator, right, as you've outlined it, and you've been so generous with your time and answering questions, even in the Facebook group, it's had a significant and a fast impact on my business already. And so I'm really looking forward to aligning with you more in the future so that I can take it to the next level. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's been great watching your transformation and your journey for sure. So, okay, well, thanks everyone. We're going to wrap up this episode, and be sure to tune in for future episodes where hopefully we have more success stories like Susan. Yay. So we will see you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.
Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we look forward to giving you the next one. You can also follow and watch the behind-the-scenes look at how I'm personally launching a brand new 6- and 7-figure product from scratch at soldwithwebinars.com/TV. And if you'd like to come hang out with other fellow experts, join our Facebook group at soldwithwebinars.com/experts. Join us next time, and I'll see you there.